Assalamu alaikum. My name is Lala Rukansar, and on behalf of University of Management Technology TV, I will be moderating today's session. It is with immense pleasure that I introduce Honorable Retired Chief Justice of Pakistan, Tassaduq Hussain Jillani sir, with us today. He is not only considered as a progressive judge, but is also known for authoring landmark decisions on women's rights, protection of minorities, and freedom of religion. It really is an honor for us to have. It really is an honor for us to have you here again. The topic for discussion for today is why religious intolerance towards minorities is increasing in Pakistan. We will have a question and answer series at the end of the lecture. Without any further delay, I would request Honorable Justice to begin with his talk.
Thank you for your kind words. I understand the members of the faculty are also here. So I must start with addressing them as honorable members of the faculty. Dear students, it's a pleasure to talk to you, rather to interact with you. And I'll say a few words about something which is of immense interest to all of you. It is about the growing intolerance in the country and the insecurity felt by minorities in some places of this country. In fact, only yesterday, when I was reading The Dawn, and this is how the editorial starts. It says, and I quote, "The embers of hate are once again being smoked. To prevent history from being repeated and innocent blood spilled in the name of religion, the government must act urgently and decisively." So this is one of our banes, that is religious intolerance. I'll give a brief overview in my talk of the creation of this country and how the issue of religious tolerance is part of the very genesis of this country. I believe the genesis of religious freedom and minority rights in Pakistan lies in the creation of the country in 1947 and apprehension of minorities in Pakistan. The founder of the country, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, in his first address to the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan in 1948 declared, and I quote, you are free to go to your temples, you are free to go to your mosque or to any other place of worship in this state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion or caste or creed, but that has nothing to do with the business of the state, unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, in Pakistan, although Islam is the state religion, yet the people in the very preamble of the Constitution have committed themselves to create a state, and I quote, I am quoting the Constitution, wherein the principles of democracy, the Pakistan would be a state wherein the principles of democracy, freedom, equality, tolerance, and social justice, as enunciated by Islam, shall be fully observed. There is a full chapter on fundamental rights, which include, inter alia, the right to life, safeguard against arrest and detention, the right to fair trial, inviolability of dignity of man, freedom to profess and to merit religious institutions, and equality of citizens. The fundamental right of religious freedom is of particular significance in Pakistan because there are believers of religions other than Islam, and there are sects within Islam, the Shia, Sunni, the Brelvi, the Deobandi, and sometimes they are daggers drawn. But despite the vision of the founder of the country and the textual guarantees given in the constitution, minorities in Pakistan have at times been subjected to discrimination and violence. I mean, just recall in the last 70 years, how many times there have been sectarian tension, there have been sectarian clashes, and there have been assault on the places of worship of non-Muslims. Then every country has its share of extremists, and Pakistan is no exception. Sometimes there is a deliberate attempt on the part of religious extremists to create an atmosphere of fear to influence judiciary and other institutions. There are pressures on the justice system that cannot be attributed to politicians. Perhaps the biggest threat to judiciary's independence comes from religious orthodoxy. When somebody is accused of blasphemy, the accused cannot engage a lawyer. They cannot find lawyers to defend themselves. The fees demanded by the lawyers who might agree to accept their briefs are beyond their means. The courts hearing their cases are nearly always besieged by mobs who threaten judges and lawyers. In such a socio-political milieu, courts have to play a more proactive role in the enforcement of these rights and to enforce the rule of law. It was this perception and belief which persuaded me as Chief Justice of Pakistan to take suo motu notice of a case in which there was a church lost in Peshawar, wherein 81 Christians were killed and several got injured. The proceedings were initiated firstly on a letter from Justice Helpline, an NGO, and then on a newspaper report that Kalash tribe and Ismailis in Chitral were being coerced to convert to a different sect within Islam or to face death threat. Now, the Ismailis are known as Shias. They were being threatened that if you don't become Sunnis, you'll face death. The court, after hearing the state functionaries and members of minority community in Pakistan, gave a detailed judgment which starts with an inspirational quote from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I quote, "All mankind from Adam and Eve, an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white man has no superiority over a black except by good conduct and piety." Now, this is unquote. Well, this is Prophet Muhammad saying that on the day of judgment, you would not be judged by the faith you hold. You would not be judged by the color you have. You will be judged by your conduct and piety. Then we have specific Article 20 in the Constitution, which says, and I quote, "Every citizen shall have the right to profess, propagate, and practice his religion." B, every religious denomination and every sect thereof shall have the right to establish, maintain, and manage its religious institutions. The court observed that religion cannot be defined in rigid terms, and that freedom of religion is a comprehensive term which includes freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and freedom of belief and faith. Conscious of the fact that Islam is a state religion and that the country was created out from undivided India, where Muslims were a minority and were seeking protection of their rights against the Hindu majority, I reminded the nation in my judgment, and I quote, "The very genesis of our country is grounded in the protection of religious rights of all, especially those of minorities," unquote. Explaining the international and historical dimension of the right to religious freedom, the court referred to Article 18 of the UN Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and intellectuals like Stuart Mill and Voltaire to bring home the point that a right to religious freedom is historically and globally well established, and any denial would be violative of the accepted human rights norms of the 21st century. I intentionally refer to the resolution of apology passed by the Parliament of British Columbia to express their regret for the discrimination meted out to the Chinese immigrants in Canada. Now, this is very interesting. There is a large population of Chinese immigrants in Canada. And in the last 50 to 70 years, a lot of discrimination was meted out to them. The Parliament of British Columbia, about 5-6 years back, passed a resolution of apology to apologize from the Chinese for having discriminated them. Now then I refer to the fact that the basic purpose of religion is to regulate human life, to bring peace in the world, and to live in a pious and righteous manner. However, I said the political aspect of religion has been rife with conflicts, extremism, and a claim of monopoly of truth, which historically has not been without its toll of human suffering. A step towards resolution is promoting religious tolerance, which should be the underlying objective in interpreting the right to freedom of religion. Courts have traditionally been viewed as conservative institutions which preserve the status quo. But I have always believed that superior courts, and particularly the Supreme Court, through such judgments in a democracy, can be catalyst for social change. The courts, and particularly the Supreme Court, can bring about a social change, can promote tolerance. For instance, the seminal judgment of the US Supreme Court in Brown's case and that of Pakistan in the minorities case underpinned the belief that the judiciary can eliminate discrimination bias through their judgments and thereby promote tolerance. Then, I authored a poem which became anthem of the Supreme Court of Pakistan. It is titled as Judicial Anthem, and it is Justice for All. And in that, poem. That poem, incidentally, is perched on the entrance gate of the Supreme Court of Pakistan with a beautiful mosaic rendering. The poem and the anthem was made part of the judgment for two reasons. Firstly, because it's a poignant reminder of the vision of the founder of the country and the ideals for which reverberated the movement for the creation of Pakistan. Secondly, the anthem cautions the nation that if the values which went into the making of the country are not lived by, the nation would bear a heavy cost. So, this is a poem which you can find on the YouTube also. I can read it out toward the end. The toil, the sweat, the tears, and the blood make up the labor for the land begot. The freedom is won, but the chains are clung. There are miles to cover. The voyage is tough and the weather is rough. The odyssey begins. The founder, that is the Qaid, declares his vision of democracy, faith, tolerance, and compassion. Discriminate the state shall not. Thou may belong to any religion, creed, or caste. Oh, the vision is distorted. The march is thwarted. Castles in the sands, babes in the woods. Our leaders make castles in the sand. These are recipes of fall abound in the books. The nation is cut. The land is bled. When the message is lost, a die is cost. The wages are loud. Beware of the clouds. Long live the message, the lamp and the rays that glow the temple, which holds the scales, pinning the dreams, the hopes, and oath of justice for all. The court reminded that we are living in an interdependent world and that we are all members of one race of humans, whichever religion we belong to, whichever sect we may belong to, with common challenges, and we cannot face these challenges without forging a common human alliance and understanding. This paradigm shift and thinking in the world around can be achieved at the international and domestic level only by discouraging sectarian and ethnic biases which are violative of shared values and fundamental rights, and by the promotion of strict compliance with these values and rights. So this, in short, was about my judgment on religious freedom, on tolerance, and about the fundamental rights which the courts have to enforce, particularly the rights of minorities to live as equal citizens and to profess their religion. Now, with this, I invite all of you, if you have any question about anything, you may speak in Urdu, you may speak in English. It's a bilingual webinar, and in whichever language you want to speak, you're welcome. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, sir, we can hear you. Thank you very much, sir. Very kind of you. I'm Dr. Usman Hamid, Director, School of Law and Policy, and I welcome you on behalf of the entire law school and its faculty, students, And this is indeed a great honor for us to have you with us. Uh, of course, this is a very sensitive topic, and sometimes a man thinks twice before uttering the words about this topic. But certainly, uh, it shouldn't be. There should be a larger debate, and I believe it shouldn't be like that. Uh, I would I would ask your opinion about the things which are happening. That where does the fault actually lies? I mean, when it comes to police, we see that FIRs are registered for blasphemy, and so many times the superior courts held that those FIRs were registered because of score settling or personal grudge of the complainants. Uh, and there are, I'm not sure, but I believe that less than 2 to 3% individuals are convicted, and their convictions are sustained by the higher courts. But since the people are kept in jails, and they had to spend a substantial amount of time behind the bars, awaiting trials. So I would really, is there any system of compensation? Uh, do you think the fault lies with not having a system of compensation for those who had to go behind the bars on false charges? Uh, or do you think that it is something wrong with the mechanism of the police and mechanism of registering FIRs? I mean, where does the fault lie? And then the second part of the question is about the policy of the state, that the speech of the Qaid-e-Azam, which was delivered on the 11th of August, I don't think that it is brought to the understanding of the students in their early years, or it is not propagated to the extent it should have been. Instead of that, many other speeches are presented before the public. So the speech where he says that you would have the right to go to your places of worship, and you would have to worship the way you want. That speech, do you think that this is the right time to focus on that speech, and in order to make our minds more accepting of the other religions? Where do you think the fault lies? Does it lie with the procedure of the police mechanisms of registering FIRs, false FIRs, or do you think we are failing as a state?
You see, I would not go that far that we are failing as a state. Every country has passed through such periods of extremism. I recall that, in fact, I read that in 1526, the Bishop of London was charged on charges, he was charged and tried on charges of terrorism, as he wanted to blow up the Parliament House, only because the Protestants had won majority in the Parliament, and he was a Catholic. This reminds me of the Shia-Sunni conflict in our country, the Deoband and Barelvi conflict, and sometimes it leads to violence and bloodshed. This is unfortunate. I think there are many reasons for this intolerance. Number one is that we lost the basic message, the fundamental message of the Qaid, which I referred to, and which the Qaid gave in his first address to the Constituent Assembly, that the state shall have nothing to do with religion, and that you may go to any temple to be a place of worship. What he wanted to canvas was that we should live as citizens. Then the fault lies with our education system also, that the kind of curriculum that we provide in schools and colleges does not promote tolerance and pluralism. The basic purpose of every good system education is to make us good human beings. And we can become good human beings if we are good Muslims. And imagine the extent of tolerance which Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had. That there is a famous story often narrated, that he used to pass by a certain path and an infidel woman used to throw rubbish on him. And one day, she did not come out to throw rubbish, and the Prophet knocked at the door to find out as to whether she's okay. His conduct was such that even non-Muslims used to feel inspired and used to get converted to Islam. Our conduct should be such that it should inspire Muslims and non-Muslims alike. Then there is systemic fault in our law enforcement. Our police officers at the local level get swayed by emotionalism, and they don't have the courage to say that this offense is made out or not made out. If a mob surrounds a police station and wants a case registered, they'll register a case. And then after a few months, either the accused is declared innocent, or if tried, he is acquitted by the courts. Unfortunately, there is no system of compensation to someone who, after years of trial, gets acquitted, whether it's a criminal case related to murder or it's a sectarian case related to religious violence. So there is need, number one, to reform our education system. There is need to educate our police force, and there is need to sensitize our students and our leaders both about the need for greater religious tolerance.
All the faculty members have plenty of questions, but I do not want to waste your time, or certainly
no, in fact, if the faculty member has any question which is of relevance, I can respond, because that would be of interest to the students as well.
Sir, when it comes to India, we can see that the way things are happening over there, it looks like the entire country of India and the people, overwhelming majority of the people are playing in the hands of extremists or fundamentalist elements. So far as the situation in Pakistan is concerned, uh, we do have religious intolerance in number of provinces, but not in the entire Pakistan. I would say that there are religious sensitivities everywhere in Pakistan, and those sensitivities can take an ugly form. But when it comes to crimes against minorities, they are mainly committed in the provinces of Sindh and Balochistan. Uh, but when the human rights organizations of the world look at this matter, and when they take up this issue before the international human rights bodies, it looks like they have always drawn a parallel between the two countries, and I mean, everyone thinks that as if both countries are facing the same intensity of religious tolerance, which I believe is to some extent unfair. I mean, this never in the history of Pakistan any religious party has come to power or taken over the reins of the government. But as far as India is concerned, I would see that I would suggest that it's about now we are looking for the transition back to democracy, because it is uh, nothing but fanaticism that you see that BJP and the rise of its parties which are making up BJP, like RSS. So, sometimes the criticism which is leveled against Pakistan, it is especially in those human rights organizations which are empowered to um, make public comments about the human rights issues of Pakistan. Sometimes their reports are out of proportion. So I would, I mean, this is my own opinion. Maybe you would certainly correct me that we do have persecution of minorities issue. We do have religious intolerance, but it is it is not endemic to the entire country. It is specific to certain areas of Pakistan. So, do you have any um, comments about this argument?
You see, yes, religious intolerance has existed in history, and that's why we have had religious wars, the wars between northern and southern airline, between uh, um, Catholics and Protestants, between northern and southern Ireland, between the Protestants and Catholics, uh, is part of history. And in Muslim history also, there have been many incidents of intolerance. But as you mentioned, both India and Pakistan got freedom in 1947 together. And we started off with all our respective uh, constitutional regimes. But unfortunately, India, despite its commitment to secularism, has not practically proved that it's a secular state. And it is not, I'm not only saying this, at this point of time, the whole world is condemning India for religious intolerance. So, but that should not be a consolation for us. We have our own issues and we need to focus on them and uh, try to improve our educational system our law enforcement system. And I again say that our courts should be more proactive in enforcing the rights of minorities, because minority is a community, vulnerable community, and because of their uh, social alienation, and um, because of the fact that they, financially they belong to rather they have rather modest backgrounds, they cannot uh, bring up their cases before the courts as easily as others can. So I believe this our courts, uh, particularly the Supreme Court, should take suo motu notice of such incidents of intolerance.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful session. One last thing, any advice you want to give to our students as how they can contribute to be an active and progressive member of legal fraternity?
Well, my only advice to them would be to aim high, have high ideals in life, pursue them with strong ambition, and mind it, ambition is one of the greatest driving forces in human history. So if you have strong ambition and an ideal to pursue, you can achieve your goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure listening to you. And, it has added to our knowledge, and certainly you will always be spreading the light of knowledge to the law students everywhere in the Pakistan and across the globe. And
Thank you very much for having me, and my best wishes for students and for members of the faculty.